Laura, we've heard about this setup whereby one person is going to be given a permit by lottery. I wonder, and I have to say I am impressed by the work that staff has done, Park Commission, in really setting up a very narrow rule structure for this. But I'm just wondering, it may be one person, but is there a limit on the number of traps?
No.
There's no limit on the number of traps. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Laura?
So we don't have a map here, but the layout of this park, I mean, you do have a lot. You know, what I would preface this question is I think there are times where we should deny the money if trapping would be, in certain situations I could see why I would vote anyway to deny trapping, but explain the layout of that parcel and how close will trails that people will be using be to it.
Sure. So this, the grant only covers the Weisensel acquisition of 25 acres. It would not apply to the rest of McCarthy County Park, nor would it apply to any other county property. McCarthy County Park is located just outside of Cottage Grove. It's about 290 acres total. The main access point to the park is here on the south side, and the parcel in question is here. There is a ditch separating the parcel from the balance of the park. The permit holder would only be allowed to enter the property via County Highway N here. It's a separate entrance. We don't prohibit the public from using that entrance point, but we don't have it marked. There are no trails in this portion of the park. The only trails are in this larger section, which again is separated from a ditch. And because the ditch is so wide and deep, it's really not feasible to think that anyone would cross that ditch. It's just not safe. If you want to set a beaver trap, it has to be at least 15 feet from the shoreline and fully underwater and ice. So in this situation, I don't believe that the ditch is even wide enough to allow for that type of trap, because you'd at that point be within 15 feet of the other shore. You could set a trap for muskrat, and those have to be at least 3 feet from the shoreline and fully submerged.
You know, we have other county land, there's other private land available for trapping. Is this going to be an attractive place for someone to go through the rigmarole of a lottery? And
in my opinion, and the opinion of other staff in our department, we don't think this is attractive. We don't actually think there are a lot of desirable habitat or species present from a trapper's perspective. There are a lot of acres around Dane County that are already open to trapping, where you don't need a permit, you don't have all of these rules and restrictions, and you have a lot more flexibility and freedom to pursue that activity.
thank you.
Would it be possible perhaps to maybe have some signage of some sort to alert the public that there's trapping in that area, maybe on the border? Are you planning on?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. We do always have informational kiosks at our main entry point that would alert the public. We do also intend to, if this is approved, to post additional signage on the property alerting the public. It would be on our website. This is actually a draft of a map that would be very similar to what both the trapper and the general public would see, so they would understand the boundaries and areas where they're allowed to go and not go with the traps.
Thank you very much.
That was interesting what you had to say about there's no trails in there, because I'd almost prefer that there were trails in there, because if there aren't, they're going to go wandering around and perhaps blunder into a trap. But having said that, what other precautions are there to make sure that these traps are they being identified in any way?
Yeah, per the permit regulations, the traps would need to be marked with colored flagging or tape. We had initially proposed that they not be marked because we thought the public would prefer not to necessarily see these unnatural colors in the landscape, but we have met with several individuals that are opposed to the permit system, and at their request, in response to those discussions, we changed the permit rules to state that you do need to flag the tracks. We also, I think it's important to note, do require that dogs be on leash in county parks. I understand that dogs do on occasion get loose. We have dog exercise areas if you want to run your dog off leash, but in the rest of the county park here, where we don't have a dog exercise area, your dog should be on leash at all times. We have rangers that patrol our county parks. We also work with the state to make sure that the warden is patrolling the area. If anyone's in violation of our rules, their permit will be revoked. And they do need to check their traps daily.
And just one other question. Who oversees them checking the traps daily? How does that get enforced?
It's a combination of, I mean, I can't say that our rangers are literally out there checking the traps daily, but it's, if there's an issue that we're alerted to, we have the capacity to send staff out there. If we receive a complaint or hear about an issue, we would get out there and check the situation.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about the initial acquisition of the land. If there's no trails, if there doesn't seem a reason why people would go wandering around in there, why do we have it?
We are hoping to over time expand McCarthy County Park. So we're just outside of the village of Cottage Grove, which is on the south side of the map. We're expecting an increase in the population of that part of the county over the next 20 years. And our goal, if possible, is to acquire land that would get the county park out to Highway N. And we feel that that would create a better overall recreational experience for the public. At the time we purchased this property, the state statute requiring trapping and hunting on these lands had been written, but the administrative code hadn't quite been finalized, and so we couldn't fully anticipate what the application of that code would be on this particular property. And so that's one of the reasons we're dealing with it after the fact.
Is it typical for us to buy land and then request reimbursement for stewardship?
Mm-hmm. And
So,
that makes our program a little bit more, it makes our projects or our grant applications score higher because we're showing that we've made our investment in the property.
it was mentioned earlier that it was untypical, but I think it is typical. Yeah.
How many times have we accepted stewardship money for a park and had to open it to trapping?
This would be the first time that a property within a park would be open, not the entire park.
And I have trouble understanding this. They're paying for half of the total area, is that right? I mean, the total area costs $320, is that right?
Right, they're reimbursing the county for 50% of our purchase of this 25-acre parcel.
Okay, not for that larger area.
Not the larger parcel. And again, the permit and everything we're discussing tonight only applies to this.
Because I was wondering if, you know, once it's like, once you drop red dye in the water, the whole, you know, gallon of water turns kind of red, and would they come back and say, well, you know, you've got stewardship money and you're allowing trapping on that. We actually meant to extend it to the whole parcel. Do you see that as a possibility?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Nixon?
No, just so I'm clear, this would pertain only to the 25 acres that you have that line going to, correct?
Correct.
It would not extend to the rest of the existing park?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, going back on kind of my previous question, this is just an initial purchase, if we're looking to purchase more land in the future, how will this 25 acres be as useful as we want it to be as a recreational area if we're not willing to then put trails through it and such because there are traps there?
Well, if the trapping permit is approved, it doesn't prevent us from building trails. So we could still build trails, and the permit would require that if traps are still being set in this area, that they be set at least, was it 30 feet off of the trail?
30
So,
yards.
or 30 yards. So it doesn't fully prevent us from doing it. We'd also like to, if we're able to acquire additional lands, and this is a very long-term vision, so just as a point of reference, we've probably been thinking about expanding the park in this direction for the last 15 years or so, and last year was the first opportunity we were able to purchase one of the properties, so it could easily be another 15 years before we buy the rest of the land, so it's if ever. So it's hard to fully speculate what might happen, but our first goal would be habitat restoration, so utilizing the lands to expand habitat, and then over time we would add different recreational amenities, and there are ways to accommodate new uses such as trails while still allowing the trapping to occur. On the other hand, if the rules change, if there's more flexibility with the DNR, we would also look to change the permit rules and perhaps remove trapping from this particular parcel.
Who owns the land north and south of that parcel that you
Two
theoretically want to
or
purchase?
3 different private landowners.
Okay.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, but Supervisor Erickson?
I have a lot of concerns about this, and I've been talking to a lot of constituents of mine. And if I was going to vote for this, I wanted to add some additional language. So I have essentially, I was thinking of amendment, but it's actually a sub, and you have copies, that's great. And I'll just read this, but then I also want to add a couple more things to it. Because on the way here, I was talking to another constituent who was asking about the types of traps. So she wanted me to add something else to this. So basically, it's be it further resolved that no more than one trapping permit shall be offered on the property, that the trapping permit shall only be valid on the property and not on the remainder of McCarthy County Park, and that the county will revoke the trapping permit if able to do so without violating any laws or rules of the Knowles-Nelson stewardship program. That's the sub. Now, what I wanted to add, though, was something specifying the types of traps that would be allowed. And so what I'd like to add on here would be to list the land traps, which would be enclosed trigger traps and cage traps, and then the Wisconsin cable restraint.
So how, you want to say after that, you want to
Right.
say and?
Yeah, and the following specific traps, I guess. The
Are
enclosed,
allowed or excluded?
what I want to say is those would be the types of traps that could be used, so the traps that would be allowed.
To make that with what Supervisor was talking about.
You talk on land or water too, or what?
This is land, so
Well,
enclosed.
on land, that's part of the rules.
Right, well, I just want to specify that as to
But
what,
That's part of the rules, right?
because I want it to be clear what type of trap it would be.
Yeah. That's already in place.
And then, so you would just want to say and that the only, and then.
Land
three-
traps allowed, I guess we could say, would be enclosed trigger traps and cage traps,
Okay.
and the Wisconsin cable restraint. And that's in the rule already. I would just like to mention it because, again, I was talking to a constituent when I was on the way here, and we were speaking exactly about this.
Sure you weren't driving in. I'm fine.
I was outside.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moved by Erickson, second by McDonald, to add language specifying the types of traps that can be used on land. Supervisor O'Loughlin, I think has a question.
Thank you, yes. On the amendment, or on the
Sub,
substitute,
Sub and then the.
yeah, and it says, and that the county shall revoke the trapping permit if able to do so without violating, who's violating here? Without violating any laws or rules.
The county. Because the reason for that, if I can answer that, the reason is, my idea was if this were to change at the state level, which is where this started from, if this were to change, then
Okay, I see
you
where
could
you're
go
going.
back
I got you.
to the way it is now, where that 25 acres would be like the rest of it is.
I got you.
That was my point, is that I want, if the state changes the policy, which I wish they would, then this
We can
25
go there.
acres goes back to restricting or not allowing trapping in county parks. That's what I'm trying to
And then
say.
we don't need to take further action as a county board, that staff is directed to do that.
If
right?
it could automatically
Yeah.
come off, however we would do that.
Okay.
If that changed, would we still be able to keep the $160,000?
If we add this in, if we substitute this and we pass.
No,
it-
if the policy changed,
Right,
Mhm.
yeah.
and we
Right,
changed our
right, because then
policy.
they're not,
Okay.
they put on this restriction for money that you can get,
Okay.
okay? Ideally, they would take it off, so we wouldn't have it. I believe it's a bad policy, but that's just my opinion, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this substitute resolution, you're moving the substitute resolution as further amended.
Right.
With the trapping language. You've moved, Supervisor McDonald has seconded. Is there further discussion?
Yes, Laura, I'm just wondering if you can answer the question. Is it legal to say that there's no more than one trapping permit? That is completely wonderful. That's what I wanted to know.
Supervisor
I
Erickson?
think that that's what we talked about at our last meeting. Right. So
Mhm.
that's
Well,
what I
I
was
just
hoping
wanted to be
that we
clear.
could, yeah.
Good.
And Supervisor Dane
Is there anything that is in the current permit procedure that would fall under this language that allows or disallows anybody to get a permit? In other words, my question is, can anybody apply for a permit for trapping, or do you have to somehow show credentials, like blood on your hands?
Laura?
Or like a trapper safety course, you mean?
Possibly.
Right, currently, to receive the permit, you do need to have a trapper's license.
Is that right? Okay. But where do they get that, from the state?
Correct.
Okay. So,
You have to take a course in order to
Okay.
get it.
okay, thank you.
Moved by Action, second by McDonald. Any further discussion? So we're moving on the sub right now, as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
The motion carries. And that has been adopted.
Laura, we've heard about this setup whereby one person is going to be given a permit by lottery. I wonder, I have to say, I am impressed by the work that staff has done, Park Commission, in really setting up a very narrow
To the park is here on the south side, and the parcel in question is here. There is a ditch separating the parcel from the balance of the park. The permit holder would only be allowed to enter the property via County Highway N here. It's a separate entrance. We don't prohibit the public from using that entrance point, but we don't have it marked. There are no trails in this portion of the park. The only trails are in this larger section, which again is separated from a ditch. And because the ditch is so wide and deep, it's really not feasible to think that anyone would cross that ditch. It's just not safe. If you want to set a beaver trap, it has to be at least 15 feet from the shoreline and fully underwater and ice. So in this situation, I don't believe that the ditch is even wide enough to allow for that type of trap, because you'd at that point be within 15 feet of the other shore. You could set
rule structure for this, but I'm just wondering, it may be one person, but is there a limit on the number of traps?
no.
There's no limit on the number of traps. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Laura? Supervisor McDonald?
So, we don't have a map here, but the layout of this park, or maybe you do have a lot, what I would preface this question is, I think there are times where we should deny the money if trapping would be, in certain situations I could see why I would vote anyway to deny trapping, but explain the layout of that parcel and how close will trails that people will be using be to it?
Sure. So this, the grant only covers the Weisenthal acquisition of 25 acres. It would not apply to the rest of McCarthy County Park, nor would it apply to any other county property. McCarthy County Park is located just outside of Cottage Grove. It's about 290 acres total. The main access point